Have you ever been on a flight as the only passenger? In April 2018, after finishing my trip to Israel, I flew back to Shanghai from Tel Aviv on a Hainan Airlines Boeing 787-9 aircraft, alone, for an 11-hour journey. In April 2018, I traveled to Israel alone, originally planning to return on April 12 from Tel Aviv. On April 11, the situation in neighboring Syria escalated unexpectedly, and the United States threatened military action against Syria. I rushed back to Tel Aviv from the Red Sea coast. The flight from Shanghai to Tel Aviv originally flew over Syrian airspace, but the preceding flight of my return flight was cancelled due to the worsening situation, which meant that the flight to take me home couldn't come. I called the airline, and the customer service informed me that the next available flight back to China was on April 15, 4 days later. They also mentioned that all passengers on the April 12 flights had been rescheduled to the 15th free of charge. My car rental was due on the 12th, and I planned to return the car and go straight to the airport. Now I was at a loss. The next morning, I returned the rental car to the airport. After explaining my situation to the rental company, they said they could extend the rental for an additional 2 days if needed. However, I figured it was too dangerous to wander in the city, so I returned the car, and took a train and a bus back to the city center from the airport, rented another small apartment, and planned to stay for 3 more days. On Saturday, April 14th, I woke up a little after 6 a.m. and saw messages from my friends saying that the United States had indeed taken military action. I immediately called the airline and asked if there were any flights back to China that day, to any city. The customer service representative paused and then said that there was a flight back to Shanghai at 10 a.m. that morning, but there were only 3 hours until departure, and there would be a fee for changing the booking. I could hardly believe my ears. I quickly checked the map for a minute and calculated the time. It seemed like I would make it just in time. So I jumped out of bed, packed my things in a hurry, and while doing so, I said, yes, please change my booking. After transferring the payment, I stuffed everything into my suitcase, rushed out of the apartment, and hailed a taxi. It happened to be a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. Although it was already past 7 a.m., there were very few cars on the road. It was not easy to find a taxi, and when I finally did, the driver demanded nearly $60 for a journey of less than 20 minutes to the airport. The problem was that the taxi couldn't accept credit cards, and I didn't have much cash left. So the driver took me to an ATM to withdraw cash before rushing me to the airport. Once I was settled in the taxi, I finally had a moment to send an email to the owner of the apartment, apologizing and explaining that I couldn't continue my stay and had to check out early. Good thing the rent had already been paid in advance. Upon arrival at the airport, I went through rigorous security checks and cumbersome questioning at the Israeli airport. When I reached the check-in counter, 2 beautiful flight attendants were processing my boarding pass, and they were jokingly saying that I was very lucky. I didn't quite understand what they meant. Once I entered the waiting lounge, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I made it in time. However, something felt strange in my mind. Why wasn't there a single person in the waiting lounge? Wasn't it time for boarding? Could it be that I was late? At that moment, a crew member approached me and asked if I was Mr. Liu. I replied, yes. Then he said, you are the only passenger on today's flight. Soon, other crew members started to gather around me. Although I didn't know any of them, they all knew that I was Mr. Liu. When it was time to board, several flight attendants stood at the gate to welcome me. Despite only carrying a small suitcase, one of the friendly male flight attendants took the initiative to carry it for me and put it in the overhead bin as soon as I entered the cabin. The actual flight route bypassed Turkey. When the chief flight attendant made the announcement, he said, "Respected Mr. Liu, your private charter flight is about to take off." During the safety instructions, it was a bit awkward as 2 flight attendants were focused on teaching only me. I tried to maintain an interested yet embarrassed expression. Fortunately, the airline's safety demonstration was in video format, and it didn't last too long. During the flight, the attentive flight attendants kept coming over to ask me if I wanted something to eat or drink, even though they had already prepared a special box of food and drinks for me in addition to the regular meals. Later, I asked them if they would like to share some of the excess food with me since I couldn't finish it all. Eventually, the chief flight attendant and a female flight attendant joined me, and we chatted for several hours. I shared with them some of my experiences in places like the Dead Sea and Jerusalem. Although they had also been stranded in Israel for a few days, they couldn't leave Tel Aviv airport. My seat was in the front left, and the whole plane was dimmed and almost completely dark in the back. Fortunately, the considerate chief flight attendant left the cabin lights on and arranged for the flight attendants to walk around during the 10-hour flight to make sure I wasn't scared of being alone in the cabin. In the end, the crew gave me a Hainan Airlines airplane model with the signatures of all the crew members, making it one of the most precious gifts I have ever received. After arriving in Shanghai a little after 2 a.m., the shuttle bus staff were waiting at the aircraft door, calling out, "Mr. Liu, the charter passenger." The immigration officer also asked, "Are you the charter passenger? We've been waiting for you." 6 years ago I switched my wife's cat with a more well-behaved look-alike. 6 years ago, I made a decision that I'm not proud of. My wife had a black cat that was extremely aggressive, scratching and hissing at everyone, and having trouble with the litter box. Despite its behavior, my wife believed she could help it improve. One week, when my wife went out of town to visit family, I was tasked with feeding the cat at her apartment. On my first night there, the cat scratched me badly. I had to go to the hospital to get shots. After I got back, I was super pissed at the cat. I told the cat that it wasn't special and that I would replace it if it scratched me again. Over time, that joke turned into a serious thought. The following morning, I went to the local animal shelter and found an identical cat. This new cat was already litterbox trained, more friendly, and better behaved overall. It was a bit skittish due to its previous owner's passing from a heart attack, but I thought the skittishness would help it resemble the original cat. I adopted the new cat, took it to my wife's apartment, settled it in, and then drove her original cat to an animal shelter in a different town to avoid any chance of my wife discovering the swap. It has been 6 years since then, and my wife and I got married 4 years ago. We still have the swapped cat, who responds to the original cat's name. My wife remains unaware of the switch and adores the cat, often bragging about how well behaved it has become. However, every time I see the cat, I am overwhelmed with guilt and feel like a total piece of shit. My son beat his bully's ass. My younger son was born with a condition called pectus excavatum, meaning his chest is sunken in. His condition was so bad that he only had 2.5 inches between his sternum and his spine, and his heart and lungs were bruised because of it. In December, he had surgery to correct it, and they put 2 nickel bars in his chest to give it space and train his bones to grow correctly. About 3 weeks after his surgery, a kid punched him and dislodged the top bar, and he had to have another surgery to put the bar back in place. Well, the doctor cleared him for most activity last week, just no skateboarding or bike riding, but he could now lift his backpack and go hang out with friends. Unbeknownst to me, the kid that hit him was actually bullying him for the whole year already, and still doing it. And because my son was afraid of getting hit again, he just took it. Well, the evening he was cleared, he came to me and said, "Dad, I'm cleared now. A kid has been bullying me and hitting me for months. Can I kick his ass?" Well, my son isn't really a fighter. He's fought with his brothers but never anyone else, and he's always gotten his ass kicked. So I just figured he was just talking. But this was the first I had heard about bullying, and I was concerned. I could tell he was distressed about the situation, so I told him to knock the fucker out. He just nodded and went to his room. Now, his older brother is tough. He had a traumatic brain injury 2 years ago, and he missed a year of school, so he's in the same grade and coincidentally takes the same class. I talked to him about it and told him to handle it, but don't get in trouble. He told me that the kid walks in every day and punches my son in the head. I asked him why he allowed that to happen, and he said he wanted his brother to get tough, and once he was tired of getting hit, he would do something about it. While I kinda agree with his thinking, I instructed him to handle it, without getting in trouble. The next morning, I took them both to school and then drove back home to get my younger daughter, who goes to a different school that starts later. On the way to take her to school, my wife calls me. "Have you taken him to school yet?" "Well, after you do, go pick up your son. He got in a fight." I just assumed it was my oldest son. Imagine my surprise when I walked into the school office to see my younger son with a grin from ear to ear. He was beaming. He pointed to another kid sitting in a chair holding an ice pack on his face. I warned him. I was so proud. He had walked into class, sat down, and the kid popped him in the head like always. My older son got up to intervene, and before he could, my younger son decked the kid with one punch. He said the kid was bawling on the floor and that it was the best day of his life. He got suspended for 3 days, and I treated him to the zoo. I left my wife because I'm sick of everything needing to match her aesthetic. I know it seems like a dumb thing to end my marriage over. But after dealing with this for so long, I'm finally done. My wife and I are both in our 30s. We have a daughter. My wife has always been pretty into appearances, but it was never that bad. She just wanted things to look nice when people came over and for special occasions and holidays. Which I fully supported. I helped her purchase decorations and put them up. When our daughter was born, she designed the baby room herself, and I executed the whole thing for her, painted the walls, installed lights, new closet. It was her hobby, and I thought it was nice to live in a nice house too. But it all changed when she started an Instagram page for moms, and got a massive amount of followers, about 400,000 since our daughter was born. Ever since then, I feel like I don't live in a house, I live in an Instagram photo shoot. There can't be any proof we actually live here. My wife stresses so much about things looking good that she doesn't actually enjoy the moment. She started a fight with me right after our daughter took her first steps. Because in the video, I had put my drink down on the table behind her, and it was all she could see, and how she'd need to edit it out of the video. She called me a selfish prick for putting my drink down on a coffee table to watch my daughter take her first steps. Our daughter's bedroom is just a mass of beige and cream, there are barely any toys in it, which was fine while our daughter was small, but now she's getting older. My wife refuses to buy her any toys that don't match her aesthetic, which is basically any toy my daughter likes. My mother took my daughter to the store and let her pick out a toy. She picked out this really nice pink dollhouse from the show she watches. She got all of the dolls and furniture, and my wife told her she had to keep it at my mother's house because there was no place for it at home. We absolutely had room and space for it, she just didn't want the pink, since it didn't match. My wife is convinced I'm leaving for another woman and I'm having an affair, since my reason is bullshit. But I'm not, this is all my true feeling. I just can't keep feeling like I'm trapped in a museum where I can't touch or move anything. I can't even build a blanket fort with my kid without my wife flipping out that they're decorative blankets that she had folded a special way. No matter who gets the kid, I'm putting a clause in the custody agreement that bans photos of my daughter on social media. I'm not going to force my daughter to be a tool for her aesthetic. Parents with nanny cameras, what crazy things did you catch your babysitter doing? My grandpa on my mom's side was staying at my house to watch my younger siblings. But they figured it best to hire a regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight, since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task since he's older. My parents were attending a wedding a couple of hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple of rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, the living room, and the kitchen. All motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine, upon returning home. However, when they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered. The master bedroom cam had never been triggered before, so they decided to take a look. They were both utterly shocked and terrified to see footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked and aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering, while intertwined towards the bed. Then banged on my parents' bed aggressively for about 20 minutes. The sitter was about 20 years old, and my grandpa was 71 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his ass off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was a connection between them and some other bullshit stuff. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there were audio for the buildup. I lay awake at night sometimes, wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking in order to get in that sitter's pants.